What is the stupidest reason you've been to the air? Heartburn. But I don't regret that I went. I had been having severe chest pain for a few days, which then became a tightness due to stress and rapid heartbeat from panicking, and then my left arm started to tingle. Maybe I was sitting funny. Anxiety attacks can be indistinguishable from a heart attack.
I've had a similar experience with anxiety. I remember feeling that tightness in my chest and thinking the worst. It's wild how stress can mess with your body. Just sitting there, you don't know if it's panic or something serious. Thankfully, I talked to a friend who calmed me down. It's a relief to know that those feelings can be just anxiety, even though in the moment it feels real.
I ate too many gummies and thought I was dying. Like literally thought my life was coming to an end. I couldn't walk without major difficulty. I couldn't talk because I was slurring so badly. My whole body was shaking and my heart was pounding. I went to my room with every intention of just going to bed, but I had this revelation that dogs know when people are going to die. So I told my dog, if I'm dying, then sit. And he sat down. Of course, my fears were then confirmed and I was in fact dying. I called 911 and went to the ER. I made the mistake of telling my family about this, and it's like their favorite story ever. They literally tell it at parties, face with tears of joy at it. Sorry for the confusion, guys. I meant edibles. I usually just call them gummies.
That sounds pretty intense. It's crazy how our minds can jump to the worst conclusions. I had a similar experience once, but it was just a really bad stomach ache after unwisely snacking. I told my friend I thought I was dying too. It turns out we both just needed to take it easy with the snacks. Now, it's a running joke when we hang out. Sometimes it's just about the little mishaps.
I vomited every 20 minutes for 10 hours. My dad stayed up all night timing them, emptying my bucket and refilling my water. Went to my PCP in the AM and got a shot in my butt. Slept for another like 10 hours. Woke up and was in so much pain I thought my appendix had burst. I was screaming and writhing, and my parents rushed me to the ER. $2,000 in tests later, and they told me nothing is wrong, and it's just my muscles being sore from the extending heaving session. And dehydration. They didn't even give me anything. Not even in 4.
Man, that's rough. Can't believe you went through all that. Your dad really stepped up, though. It's wild how something like that can hit you and make you feel like you're falling apart. At least they told you it was just muscle soreness, but no 4? That's pretty crazy. It's like you expect a bit of relief after all those tests. Glad you're okay now, though. Hope you recover fully soon.
Finals night, my first semester of college. Pounded a bunch of energy drinks to study, then a bunch of Benadryl because I wanted to get some sleep and wake up early to study instead. Thought I was dying. Whole body was tingly, my heart was doing flippy deuce, couldn't breathe. Got to the ER and they went, "Yeah, you gave yourself a poor man's speedball." Give me a bunch of fluids and they sent me on my way. Still made it to my 10 a.m. final across campus. Surprisingly, never graduated college.
That sounds intense. I can relate to the struggle of finals night. One time, I stayed up too late studying and tried to function on just caffeine. I didn't end up in the ER, but I felt like a zombie the next day. It's funny how college makes you do wild things just to get by. At least you made it to your final, even if college didn't work out in the end.
I tripped on the stairs and whacked my shin super hard against the metal edge trim. It swelled up and bruised badly, so I went in. They couldn't get an image of the bone because of the gross hematoma in there. They also couldn't cast me or bind it in any way because of compartment syndrome and stuff. I couldn't have a boot or a scooter because they'd press on the area. So they gave me a tetanus shot because I had broken the skin on metal and mine was out of date, and sent me home to heal like a medieval peasant. Leg up all the time, only up to go to the bathroom and shower, for at least 2 weeks. I inspected my leg every day, and even with minimal gravity, I watched the hematoma break up and discolor everything down to blotches on the bottom of my foot. After 2 weeks, I went back, strolled on an LOL, and they imaged again. They could see where the break was healing, so they sent me home for another week off work, more light duty at home. And that was that. But yeah, tripping on the stairs and banging my shin.
That sounds rough. I remember a time when I banged my knee really hard on a corner of a table. It swelled up, and I thought for sure something was broken. Just like you, I had to keep it elevated and avoid moving too much. The bruising was wild to see, changing colors every day. It took a while to heal, but at least I didn't have to deal with major medical stuff. Just a pain for a while.
I was depressed and wasn't refilling the Brita to have water to drink. I also wasn't eating because of the depression. I ended up with a UTI, dehydration, kidney infection, and walking pneumonia. I was weak and couldn't stand up without fainting. I nearly went into sepsis. This all to say depression can kill you even if you don't have an active plan to end your life.
It's tough to hear stories like this. Sometimes, people don't realize how serious depression can be. It sneaks up and impacts your daily life in ways that are hard to understand until it's too late. It's a reminder that taking care of ourselves is so important. If anyone feels like this, reaching out for help is crucial. You never know how much better things can get with support.
Pain in the quadrant of my chest containing my heart. Fun fact, when you say that at the ER, they treat it very seriously because they think you're having a heart attack. Well, after about 5 hours and a bunch of x-rays, it turned out that it was most likely just irritations from muscle spasms rubbing up against my bones. They ruled out pretty much anything involving my heart and my other organs, so they figured that was just the most likely explanation. It went away after a couple days. Edit. I get the post is about stuff like stubbing your toe, but I honestly felt so embarrassed in that moment. I think a lot of the nurses were pissed at me when they discharged me too. I didn't even mean to go to the hospital. It was just next to urgent care, and urgent care was closing since this happened around 10 p.m. But they said they were closing, so I figured ER is across the street, might as well see what they have to say.
I can relate to the whole hospital mix-up. I once had a panic when my stomach hurt a lot one night. I thought it was serious and ended up at the ER. After hours of waiting, they just said it was gas. I felt embarrassed too, just like you. Those doctors and nurses have seen it all, but you never know what might be serious. Better safe than sorry, I guess.
Gestured too wildly at a dinner party and knocked a full cup of nearly boiling tea onto my lap. Had to strip off my pants in front of my boyfriend's parents, and a bunch of my leg skin went with it. The ER treated me well. Luckily, it was just a deep second-degree burn, so I was out of bandages in 2 weeks.
That sounds really awkward. Imagine being at a dinner party and then suddenly having to deal with that. It's good that the burn wasn't worse, but having to strip your pants off in front of family must have been uncomfortable. Props to the ER for handling it well. At least you were out of bandages in a couple of weeks. Quite the story to tell, though.
A puppy I was playing with stepped on my hand, and my knuckle scraped the concrete. I washed it and put peroxide on it. Well, a day or two later, I was at work and showed my co-workers how this red line was growing from my knuckle and was at my wrist. This was pre-internet, and they suggested I call Dial a nurse. She immediately told me to get to the hospital. I felt so stupid waiting in line with serious injuries, and when I was called and asked what was wrong, I said I hurt my finger. Once they saw the line that was up my forearm, I was ushered back and it was painfully scrubbed.
That sounds rough. It's funny how a small injury can turn into something bigger. I had a friend who did something similar. He got a little scrape while biking and ignored it. Days later, he had to go to the doctor because it was infected. Like you, he felt silly explaining it. Sometimes, we don't realize how serious these things can get until it's too late. Lesson learned, I guess.
Didn't make it to the ER, but I had been out drinking and got home and puked in the toilet. Looked down and saw only red and thought, oh fuck, I'm dying. Called the ambulance, and they came and took one look at the vomit. Ambulance people asked, have you been eating strawberries tonight? And me in my drunken state said, yeah, we had it for dessert. They gave me a pat on the back, wished me a happy hangover tomorrow, and left.
That sounds rough, man. It's funny how the mind jumps to the worst conclusions when you're in that state. Glad it was just strawberries, though. Those ambulance folks have seen it all. It's wild how one night can lead to all that panic. But I guess you learned something about checking what you eat when drinking. In the end, just another wild story to tell.
When I was 10, I was blow drying my hair and thought since my hair was fluffy, my cat Fluffy would like it. Needless to say, she scratched the shit out of me. My mom had to take me to the ER for massive scratches all over my arms and chest. I still have the scars, but have never used a hairdryer since. Grimacing face Fluffy lived another 15 years happy, as could be, as I gave her extra snacks all the time after that.
That's a funny story. It's wild how a simple idea can lead to such chaos. It must have been tough getting those scratches treated. But I guess you learned your lesson about combining cats and hair dryers. Good that Fluffy got to enjoy her time with you after. Sounds like she was well taken care of.
I have never personally went to the ER for anything embarrassing, but I worked in an ER and have seen a few things. One female in her late 20s came in because she said she had a crack in her vagina. So doctor gets out the equipment to do an examination. He told her he didn't see anything abnormal. She said, I have a crack right here. He begins to tell her she was supposed to have a crack there because that's the way the vagina is made to be. I was in total shock. This is something a 3-year-old would say, not something a 20-something-year-old woman would just now discover. The other one was a 30-something female comes in with vaginal spasms. I was not assigned to that patient, but she was quickly released.
It's interesting how some people have no clue about their own bodies. I remember a friend once thought a common thing was a big issue. She mentioned feeling something weird and thought it was serious. After a visit to the doctor, she learned it was nothing out of the ordinary. It made us all laugh later, but in the moment, you could see the concern. Just goes to show, some basic knowledge can really help.
Panic attacks that felt like heart attacks. It was awful. It would go away, and then an intense wave would hit and my heart rate and BP would spike. It eventually stopped, but I went back at least 3 times before getting an echocardiogram and other tests done to be told to lose weight and go to therapy.
That sounds really rough. I had a friend who went through something similar. They thought they were having heart issues, but it turned out to be panic attacks each time. It took a while for them to figure it out, and they got a bunch of tests. In the end, it was about managing stress and making some lifestyle changes. It can be tough to get to the bottom of these things.
My grandma died at the hospital. We went home after, and my family was standing in the backyard talking. I took one step off the deck and sprained my ankle. Immediately fell into the grass, writhing in pain. My dad thought I was joking. My whole ankle immediately turned blue. I had to go back to the same hospital my grandma died at literally 2 hours prior. Or the time I rode on the front cargo rack of a 4-wheeler and we hit a tree head-on. I broke my leg in 3 places. Note to self, ride behind the handlebars and for Christ's sakes, wear a helmet.
That sounds rough. It's strange how life throws in both heartbreak and pain in such a short time. The whole ankle incident right after your grandma's passing must have felt surreal. Then that 4-wheeler crash adds a whole new level of lessons learned the hard way. Riding safely seems obvious in hindsight. Guess those moments stick with you, serving as reminders to be careful, even when you least expect it.
I was about 6 years old, was playing with my sister in her room, and something compelled me to put a small rock up my nose. It went all the way down. I couldn't get it out. Went to my dad, who rightfully recognized that this is actually very dangerous, and took me to the ER. Got seen right away, doctors were prepping me, and I sneezed it out, LOL.
That's pretty wild. Kids can be so curious, and sometimes make strange choices. It's funny how a little sneeze ended up being the solution after all the hassle. I can imagine the relief you and your dad felt after that. It's a story you definitely don't forget. I'm sure your sister found it all amusing, too. Sometimes, those odd childhood moments stick with us the most.
I got my first jacket with pockets and thought I was so cool, so I kept my hand in them the whole time even though it wasn't that cold. We were walking a lot that day and tripped over a slightly raised sidewalk from tree roots. Ended up busting my head and having large amounts of bleeding. I was like 4.
That's a classic childhood moment. It's funny how little things like jackets can make kids feel so confident. Balancing that cool factor with the whole tripping ordeal is just something kids do. I remember similar times when feeling cool led to some not-so-great outcomes. At least it makes for a memorable story now, even if it hurt back then. Glad you made it through that with just a story to tell.
Earache. It hurt so bad. The whole right side of my head/face hurt, and I couldn't hear out of my ear. Thankfully, it was a slow night, so they took me straight back. Turns out my eardrum ruptured. Fun times all around. There wasn't really anything they could do, but they gave me way too strong pain medicine, which I never took, and told me to take Claritin. Other than that, I went to the ER twice because of what I now know were anxiety attacks, but I had no idea at the time. And then the time I sliced my ankle open on a scooter kickstand and needed quite a few stitches.
I can relate to those rough nights. Had my share of ear issues too. It's wild how something small can turn into so much pain. And anxiety attacks can really mess you up when you don't know what's happening. Then there's that scooter incident. I once cut my hand pretty deep trying to fix something. Funny how those little accidents stick with you. You learn to be cautious after that.
Brother-in-law became a sommelier and was showing everyone his new skill of sabering a champagne bottle. Then I asked if I wanted to try. So I did. The bottle exploded in my hand, slicing a 3-inch gash in my hand. Didn't hurt, but my hand started bleeding immediately, and off we go looking for a clinic open on Christmas Day. Rest assured I was charged more at the ER because it was Christmas. 6 stitches.
That must have been a wild Christmas. Trying to show off a cool skill and ending up in the ER. It's crazy how quick things can go south. At least it wasn't too painful, but the extra charge at the hospital is just typical. 6 stitches sounds rough. Hopefully, you got some good stories out of it afterwards, even if it wasn't the holiday memory you aimed for.
I woke up one night with shortness of breath. It felt like I couldn't take a normal breath. Woke up my wife, and we went to the ER. By the time I got there, I was feeling normal. The doctor did an EKG, didn't see any issues, and said I probably had an anxiety attack. I said, in my sleep? I'm not even a nervous or stressful person. So weird.
That's odd. It's strange how the body works sometimes. You think you're fine, then suddenly you're not. I had a similar experience, waking up feeling like I couldn't breathe. Turned out to be nothing, just a weird episode. Kind of unsettling though, especially when you're not usually anxious. It makes you wonder what else your body might pull on you when you're not paying attention. Glad it turned out okay for you.
So, I go to work. A couple hours in, I use the restroom. I'm super pale. My legs don't see the light of day. But I notice I'm kind of purple and splotchy. Okay, whatever. This happens once more, and it's a little worse. By the time I get home, I'm scared. I'm already prone to freaking out health-wise, and when my husband, who is the calm one, says we should go to the ER, we go right away. So it's a small town. We don't wait for very long. I'm sitting in my gown on the bed, and a young nurse with purple hair comes in. I was like, great. She asks me a few questions, then she says, "Can I try something?" I saw it on TikTok. I'm rolling my eyes in my head, but when she takes an alcohol pad, wipes my leg and asks me if I'm wearing new pants, I immediately feel so stupid and ashamed for judging this young girl. It was the fastest, cheapest ER visit ever. We all had a good laugh, and I always wash my new clothes.
That's a pretty relatable experience. It's funny how sometimes we overthink our health issues. You went from panic mode to laughing about it in no time. That nurse sounds like she knew what she was doing, even with her TikTok knowledge. It's nice to hear that a little humor helped lighten the mood after what could have been a stressful visit. And washing new clothes is a solid takeaway.
Anxiety attack. I and my coworker thought I was having a heart attack. I was going through a really traumatic event at the time, and one day at work my chest was really hurting, and I almost fainted and collapsed if my boss hadn't caught me in her arms. I was taken to the ER by an ambulance, spent half the day getting tested to be told I had an anxiety attack and there is nothing wrong with me. I honestly felt embarrassed, especially after the doctors made me feel like I wasted their time. And I was so ashamed to go back to work only to tell everyone I had an anxiety attack.
That sounds rough. It's crazy how sometimes your mind plays tricks on you like that. You were probably just overwhelmed, and it's unfortunate that the doctors didn't handle it better. Feeling ashamed about it is common, but it's important to know these things happen. It's hard to go back after an experience like that, but hopefully your coworkers understood. Everyone has their own struggles, even if they don't show it.
Panic attack, it's not that stupid. Those who have experienced them know that it genuinely can feel like you are dying. Personally, my panic attacks always start by my left arm getting tingly and numb. I was very worried the first time I had a panic attack since I didn't know what was happening. Had a few attacks after that, but knew what they were until another one happened, and it was worse. The second ER visit was because the panic attack gave me stroke symptoms like droopy mouth and couldn't talk, my muscles turned into rock, so tense I couldn't move my fingers. My past panic attacks weren't that bad. Still horrible, but first time with stroke symptoms. Was also very scared that it was actually a stroke, so I went to ER. This one lasted around 3 hours. Worst experience of my life.
I get it. Panic attacks can be really intense and frightening. I had a similar experience where my heart raced, and I felt like I was losing control. I didn't know what was happening either, and it felt like it was never going to end. After some time, I learned to recognize the signs, but that first time was definitely a shock. It's tough when your body reacts in such extreme ways.
Bad shroom trip. I had heard of some drugs that can kill the trip instantly, and there was no talking me out of at least hearing they don't have those sort of things at a hospital from the hospital staff, so we went. They obviously couldn't do anything, and I had to sit in a room, half laying on a table, one foot flat on the floor, the other hanging haphazardly off the side off the bed, holding my sister's hand and clutching my head while I watched my brain signals move around my brain. Very fun times.
That sounds rough. I had a similar experience once. I took something that didn't sit well with me, and it just went south. I ended up pacing in my room, trying to shake off the feeling. I remember calling a friend who talked me through it. We ended up laughing about it later, but in the moment, it felt like I was stuck in my own head. Not much fun.
I was drunk, running down the street shouting, "Look how fast I am!" I was not fast. I was 32. I am very stupid. Of course, I slipped on the ice. It was wintertime in Canada. My poor, sweet husband did his best to help me. Mortified, he delicately removed the embedded pavement from my face. There was nothing to be done for my Z-shaped wrist, though, so he took me to the ER. Unfortunately for him, I was drunk, concussed, and, as I've explained, quite stupid. I started telling everyone that my husband pushed me. I don't know why, but nobody believed me. Maybe because he was sober and I stink of alcohol? Maybe because he was kindly helping me remove the bits of asphalt peppered into my cheekbone? Or maybe it was because I kept trying to run outside to be free? I guess we'll never know. Eventually, my husband and the hospital security guard did convince me to wait inside and get my broken wrist treated. So embarrassing.
It sounds like a wild night. I can picture the scene. Running around, feeling invincible, only to take a hard fall. It's funny how our brains work when we're drunk. Your husband sounds like a good guy, trying to help you while you just want to escape. At least the hospital got to see your dramatic side. It's a story you'll probably laugh about later, even if it wasn't funny at the time.
Okay, this isn't technically me, but I was there. A guy who was a close friend at the time. We were all drinking and trying to light a bonfire in his yard, but having trouble. He and his brother decided to start pouring gasoline on the wood. Then threw a match, and there was this big whoosh of flame. Dude was too close and was sort of thrown back and had to be taken to the ER. Came back pretty drugged up on painkillers. He was fine eventually, but it was crazy.
Not my story, but it was wild to witness. We were just trying to have a fun night, and then it turned into a trip to the ER. The guy had no idea how dangerous it was getting too close. He was all drugged up when he came back, and we couldn't stop laughing, but also felt bad. You never think a bonfire would end like that.
I too went once for an anxiety attack. I didn't know it was that at the time. All I knew was that when I tried to lie down to sleep, I felt like a heavy weight was on my chest or that I was in a coffin, so much so I'd have to sit up to catch my breath. You know what caused said anxiety? Buying my first house. Faced with rolling eyes.
I get it. That feeling where you can't breathe, thinking something's off. I had a friend who went through something similar. He thought it was just stress from work, but it hit hard during a quiet night at home. Turns out, it was a lot of pressure from big life changes. Buying a house changes things. It's a lot to take in, and it can really get to you when you least expect it.
I had a pupil that was stuck dilated and wouldn't constrict. I hadn't been to the eye doctor or anything. I woke up from a nap like this. Google said I could be dying of brain tumor / bleeding / swelling / etc. So I went in when I realized. Nurses and doctor agrees it was potentially super serious. MRI was totally fine though, so they just gave me eye drops to constrict it and told me to see my optometrist. She verified everything was fine, so it was just a fluke? Ick. I'm glad I went in, but it wound up being so dumb.
That sounds pretty unsettling. I can relate to that feeling of panic when something seems off, and you think it might be serious. I had a similar experience with a strange pain that turned out to be nothing. It's good you got checked out. Sometimes the worry can feel bigger than the actual issue. At least you got peace of mind in the end, even if it felt kind of dumb.
I was fishing with my brother in a boat. My wife was with us. He reared back to make a mighty cast with a large lure and caught my lip. 2 barbs went in, and they were able to get 1 out. My wife drove me to the small town, laughing the whole way. The doc was a real pro and had it out in no time. He kept it to add to his extensive collection. Who knew, right? I felt like such an idiot walking into the ER with a fishing lure hanging out of my mouth. Still have the scar too.
That's a memorable trip. It's funny how things can take a turn like that. Your brother probably felt bad after that cast. And your wife laughing must have made it even more awkward. Got to admire the doc's collection though. Walking into the ER like that sounds like something out of a comedy. It's nice to look back and laugh, even if it left a mark.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.